Hey everybody, welcome back to the Walking with Jesus Daily class. This is the audio recording for day 15, which is also going to be day 1. Well, the cool part of this is that you guys have already made it through 2 weeks. If you have made it through 2 weeks and you are still here, then you are prepared. You have started thinking about other people. You have started realizing whose faith you have, and hopefully now we can build on that. We have put a major focus in these first 2 weeks on trying to understand who Jesus is in a very small way, and what his commandments are, what the greatest commandments are, and then how he chose, who he chose, and what that work, what that ministry looked like in the beginning. Now these will be 2-part audio sessions. The first I will try to do within 10 minutes and cover the scripture if I can. And the second will be no time limit, unlimited talking time. But I'll also try to keep that as brief as I can so that you don't feel like that you hear nothing but my voice when you close your eyes. I do want you to think hard on this, though, and I haven't reiterated this maybe enough. I did it in my other class. But, guys, if all you have time for is a 30-minute section of time to devote to God, can I just ask you spend it in prayer? There is nothing more important or more powerful than prayer. I was talking with a good buddy tonight just about if you were in a relationship with your wife or your spouse, right? And you could read a book about him or her, or you could check out online to see what they're like, or you could go and listen to other people talk about her or him, and then that would be how you developed a relationship with them. Or you could just talk to them directly and get to know them on a personal level. Which one would you pick? And obviously it's the last one. If you're wanting to get to know someone or have a relationship with someone, then you're not taking other people's word for it, and you're not even going to read a book about them, nor are you going to go check out their latest Facebook post or Instagram. Okay, you're going to know them in the trenches. You're going to know them in the sunshine, the mountaintops, and the valleys. So please go pray. There is nothing more powerful or important in your relationship than for you to develop time in prayer. So if you have to decide between this and prayer, turn this off now and go pray. If you've already prayed and your heart is prepared, let's go. We are in Luke. We're actually going to begin our chronological walk today. The timing works out perfect. So I'm going to read Luke chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. This is super important for all of the Gospels. That's why it's first. And then instead of John 1, which I really wanted to do first, but this makes sense. So here we go. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us, it seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. Okay. Clearly, Luke has been hanging out with Paul because that was one sentence, one big run-on. And Paul was the king of the run-on, and Luke is following in his footsteps. I expected more out of Luke. Let's think about Luke for a second. He is a Gentile physician historian. So when we put all those things together, I'm going to try to do this real quick, okay? He was specific, he was fact-based, and he didn't walk with Jesus. He was not an eyewitness of the things that Jesus did. He was an eyewitness of the things that Paul did. And seeing what Paul did in the name of Jesus and not in the name of Paul would have had a huge impact on him. And that just reminds me, that's kind of a big deal for us to think about. We have got to be sure that our lives look like Jesus is interacting in them, and that it's Jesus doing the good works so that God gets the praise and not us. If we're ever in a situation other than that, we got to change that. You might be listening to an audio recording that I'm doing or that somebody else is doing, but all of that is pointed to Jesus, and none of that pointed to the person that you're listening to. If I happen to say something that sticks in your mind and has a big impact, know that it wasn't from me. You can talk to my wife; she can tell you clearly that I am not a smart man, and I do not have the ability to come up with to conjure up great sentences to make you think or rethink or whatever. So, when we read this, We're at the 5-minute mark, so let's dig. This is what he's saying. There have been things happen in our lives, things that have happened that are about Jesus. Okay, now there are several who have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us. There are several people that are trying to write this down. Why? Because it's important. Why do you write things down? Because it's important. I'm not one that makes a grocery list, but I probably should. But you write it down so you don't forget something. You write stuff down that's important or a good memory. This is no different. Okay, this needed to be preserved for us. It says, just as those who were from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us. These eyewitnesses are telling the story of Jesus over and over and over again. If you have a great story about how something happened, so-and-so, there's no time left, and he turned around and threw the ball behind his back and it went in and they won the game, and you're like, no way. And they're like, well, there were 100 people that were watching it, and we have eyewitnesses that saw this happen. You're like, this is crazy. I can't believe it. But you say there are eyewitnesses, so this is something that's going to go down in the history books or whatever it might be. The point is, there has to be witnesses for an event. It says in this case, there were eyewitnesses and ministers of the words that Jesus spoke, and they're delivering this information to us. So this is what he says in verse 3. It seemed good to me also. It seemed like a good idea for me, having followed all things closely for some time past. I have talked to a lot of people. I've interviewed a lot of people. And since I have followed this very closely and literally walked with Paul, to write an orderly account for you. And who is you? Well, he says, most excellent Theophilus. But we don't know who Theophilus is. What we do know is that if you look up the word Theophilus, it means lovers of God. So could this be a gospel written in code so that people could pass it around and not get in trouble? Let me tell you, there was severe persecution for people who were Christians. Severe persecution, not just from Jews, but also from Rome and from Romans. Okay, so it seemed like a good idea for me, since I have followed closely, to write an orderly account. I'm going to write things down in a more historical fashion. Matthew's writing method was different. We're going to talk about it. Mark's writing method was different. We're going to talk about it. And so was John's. But Luke is the one that tries to put this in some kind of an orderly account. Why? Because he's writing a historical document about Jesus. And then in verse 4 it says, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. Look at the things in your life that you have been taught. Some of them are correct. Some of them are completely incorrect. But when you read the words of God, you may have certainty, because there are eyewitnesses that witnessed the things that were said and the things that were done. And you can know whether that was true or that was untrue. You can know whether you were being led to believe something or not led to believe something. Now, why is it so important for him to have written this eyewitness account? Why would a non-Jew, non-eyewitness of Jesus, a person with a great career as a physician who has taken up being a church historian, why in the world would they do this? This is risking a lot. For what? Truly, I believe it's because he believed. Because he was filled with the Spirit of God, that he had given up all things to follow along with Paul. And imagine what he did on the way. I mean, Paul's over there. He's like, this guy over here is sick. And Luke's probably like, oh, I'm a doctor. I'll take care of it. And Paul's like, you're healed. And then they're better. And Luke's like, oh, man. Well, I guess I'm going to be a historian now, since they just don't really need medicine anymore. But when we look at this real quick, let's think about main points. Things in life that we keep and record are based off of eyewitness accounts. I have never been in the presence of somebody who was in World War I or World War II, maybe my grandpa. But the eyewitness accounts, I believe what I read in history books. I believe of the terrible, horrible, awful things that were done to people in World War II, not because I was there, but because so many people were there and so many people validated that I would have to believe it. This is the account that Luke makes. Matthew, eyewitness. John, eyewitness. John Mark was along with Peter and with like Paul. So his would also be an account kind of like Luke's, but different. Okay, so we have eyewitness accounts and non-eyewitness accounts taking the stories of other people, and they all line up, and that's amazing. So if we believe of the terrible, terrible things that happened in World War I and World War II, the way people were treated and destroyed, then we would have to believe in the good things that we learn about from Jesus. Yes, the things are unbelievable, and so are the terrible things. They're equally unbelievable and equally matched with being eyewitness accounts. I'm out of my 10 minutes, but if you want to keep on, flip over to side B and we'll keep going.